Hello, everybody, and welcome to the November 13th, 2022 edition of the Boxing Source Radio Show. I am your host, James Belt, the leader of the Boxing Source. You can catch us on social media, of course, through Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, you have the content that is on the YouTube channel. You can also check out the website, theboxingsource.net. Once again, that is theboxingsource.net, where you're going to have links to multiple videos from the YouTube channel, also the boxing rankings from every division, and you also have the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings. That's right, the Boxing Source pound for pound rankings. So you don't necessarily have to go to that four-letter network's pound for pound rankings. You could get the pound for pound rankings from the Boxing Source. That's right. Okay. So you have that. And here on this particular episode of the Boxing Source Radio Show, of course, we're going to be going over the results of the Royal Rumble. I mean, the fight card that happened over in Ohio. Yes. And of course, we have the first offense of the WBO middleweight title from Janibek and Lee. So we'll be going through that also, and maybe we'll touch on yet what happened today in a quote unquote exhibition match with TBE. You know, you know what it is. You know what? My thing is this. You know, I got a black eye in this fight, but you know what? I still showed out, and I knocked him out. But yeah, we could go over that as well. But I wanted to first go into that defense of the WBO middleweight championship as Janibek and Lee took on Denzel Bentley. Lee came in with a record of 12 wins and 0 losses against Denzel Bentley. Came in there with a record of 17 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. Yes, the WBO middleweight championship was pretty much like awarded to Lee as after it was vacated by Demetrius Andrade, as Andrade had the intentions of moving up to 168 pounds, but of course, with the first go at it, he suffered an injury when he was supposed to originally fight Zach Parker as scheduled. But then that happened. And then once that fell through, his contractual duties to Matchroom Boxing had ended. So when the second purse bid went through for Demetrius Andrade and Zach Parker, was much less than what it was the first time around. And because of that, you're not going to have Demetrius Andrade versus Zach Parker. You're pretty much going to have Zach Parker, fighting elsewhere, and that is, a little bit of a situation there for, Demetrius Andrade. But for Zach Parker, he's still, put in position to, fight for that. What is it? The WBO interim title for 168 against John Ryder. So there's that. So outside of that, back to the bout in reference to Janibek and Lee going up against Denzel Bentley. Denzel Bentley had been ranked, I guess it was like number 12 or number 13 in the WBO rankings before the new one came out, where he was positioned at number 9. But a number of people kind of like expected Janibek and Lee to get a fairly easy win over Denzel Bentley in this particular matchup. I would kind of like say that this particular bout was kind of better than I expected. Was better than I expected. No, I had not, saw much from Denzel Bentley before this particular bout. He, had the TKO loss to Felix Cash last year. then had a string of victories, going into this year before the bout against Janibek and then Hanuli. So didn't really get much out of that. Um, he had like a couple bouts against Mark Heffron, and well, I would say maybe I would say win over Lennis Odafia, who was undefeated at the time that Bentley had scored that win. But outside of that, it really wasn't that much notable victories coming out of Denzel Bentley. But he did give a very good showing in this bout here against Janibek and Nimhanuli. Nimhanuli, of course, coming there as Kazakh style and undefeated and got the WBO middleweight title, was, awarded it or whatnot. And, we kind of like seen a fairly good start from Janibek and Nimhanuli. But, he was going up there against someone in Denzel Bentley, of course, who, had to get used to fighting the southpaw in this particular instance. Of course, that's kind of like a rare occurrence these in these boxing quarters. But thing is, Denzel Bentley pretty much like held his own, especially in the middle parts of the fight. There were a couple of times when Denzel Bentley got caught off guard or off position when he was caught by the shots from Janibek and Mpanuli. And they were, or at least they seemed to be more powerful shots from Janibek and Mpanuli, but it wasn't anything to where it really affected Denzel Bentley to where he was in big trouble. Like he got caught by flush shots on multiple occasions here. Not necessarily. It's more about him being, or what I would say, Denzel Bentley being off balance in a number of occasions. So he was still in there. He was still game for the first half of this particular fight. And going into, that sixth, seventh, and eighth round, he started to get a couple of rounds in from Janibek and Mpanuli and catching them a few times with some pretty good shots. Did they have much behind those punches from Denzel Bentley? No, not really. But still, like, kind of, stop the momentum of Janibek and Mpanuli over the course of the bout. And I felt like it was a pretty good scrap going through those, eight, 9, or 10 rounds before you got to the championship rounds in 11 and 12. While you did see some success from Anim Newly, it wasn't as much success as people expected. Particularly coming from his bouts that he's had before that. Real quick on the live chat, man. Quick shout out to Hardcore Boxing News. I've been a supporter here at the Boxing Source for a good while, and we've been a supporter of Hardcore Boxing News for a good while as well. So shout out to Hardcore Boxing News there in the live chat. But going back to what I was talking about with Anim Hanuli, I was in attendance for his bout against Hassan and Dom that was at the Michelob Ultra Arena last November, as that was part of the card for Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter. And even though he did get the stoppage victory over Hassan and Dom, there was like a lot of buzz behind Anim Hanuli, going into that bout. And for me, I just really didn't see or wasn't really that sold on Anim Hanuli that kind of like said, oh goodness, this guy is going to be a real problem in the middleweight division. But we had that fight. Then he had the fight for the WBO interim title against Danny Dignam, earlier this year, where he scored a quick 2-round TKO victory. So like I said, against Denzel Bentley, who, like I said, was ranked number 9 in the WBO rankings. We kind of like expected Nimpanuli to kind of like go through Denzel Bentley. Was highly favored in this bout, coming into this bout against Denzel Bentley. But like I said, Denzel Bentley really held his own, pretty much from a defensive standpoint. There was a number of punches that were missed by Anim Hanuli over the course of this bout. And he was getting tagged a good little bit, particularly in the middle rounds, you know. I'm just saying, man, if Denzel Bentley, had a little bit more pop behind his punch, man, maybe he could have had some issues there for Anim Hanuli. But he was able to, stay patient and, do what he had to do over the course of this particular bout that went through the full 12 rounds. And it was a unanimous decision victory for Janibek and Hanuli there with two scores of 116 to 112 and one score of 118, 110. So you did have two scores where they had Anim Hanuli winning 8 rounds, and one where Anim Hanuli won 10 rounds. But, for me, I felt like it just didn't seem like it seemed like a much better bout than those scorecards kind of like indicated to me. I thought, we got a good little effort from Denzel Bentley. He was taking some good shots from Anim Hanuli, but was still up there, still game, especially in those last couple of rounds. He did take some real serious shots where it looked like he was in some real trouble, especially at the beginning of the 12th round, where he caught some good shots early. Thought, he was stunned in that particular instance where Anim Hanuli could have, came forward a little bit more and could have, got the stoppage, but he wasn't able to do that there. So Anim Hanuli got through that last round, the 12th round, and was able to score the unanimous decision victory to kind of like had that first offense of the WBO middleweight championship, and so he is there now at was it 13-0 in his professional career. And with that being said, he has that first defense out of the way. Not sure what that would kind of like mean for Anim Hanuli here going into 2023, because given the situation that happened earlier this year, or going into the beginning or the end of last year, the end of last year, he was pretty much ordered to fight the previous WBO middleweight champion and Demetrius Andrade, but Demetrius Andrade made the decision to try to move up and contend for that number one spot in the 168-pound rankings. And so since that fell through, you had another instance where Anim Hanuli could have been in a bout against Jaime Munguia, but that didn't materialize. So that's how he ended up fighting Danny Dignam for his first fight this year, and then for him to eventually get this WBO middleweight title. Now it's him having that first defense, and so for me, I'm like, well, I'm looking at these rankings. You have Jaime Munguia that's been number one for the WBO ever since he's entered the 160-pound division and still hasn't had a fight for that WBO middleweight title. You also have Chris Eubank Jr. They're ranked at number 2, who, of course, could have had a bout earlier this year there against Conor Benn, and we all know what happened with that. You have, who is this, Miram Nursultanov, and as mentioned, Felix Cash, who, did have that win over Denzel Bentley. That's number 4. And Esquiva Falcao, who was also on that card on November 20th, 2021 against Patrice Volney. He's there at number 5, but Esquiva Falcao may end up facing Gennady Golovkin for the IBF and WBA middleweight titles. So those are potential opponents there for Janibek and Hanuli. But, for some people, they just feel like after watching this particular bout, they weren't really impressed with Janibek. And like I said, when I saw him last year against Hassan and Dom, I didn't really see what the what the buzz is, or what the craze is there for an Impanuli. But it remains to be seen how he gets through um, his reign as the WBO middleweight champion. I don't see him having a unification bout with Golovkin. As I said, Golovkin had the whole thing with him and the WBA and IBF, where Golovkin could have been facing Ruslan De Lara, but the IBF said that he got to face Squealer Falcao, and the WBA granted that exception. So it looks like Gennady Golovkin would be fighting Squealer Falcao, I guess, um, next year. So, I mean, outside of that, I really don't see that many other potential opponents there for Janibek and Impanuli there in the near future. But like I said, with him being undefeated, yeah, he has that amateur background, I guess, has that nickname Kazakh style, and kind of like goes through that whole little thing with Gennady Golovkin and other fighters from that area. I really just don't see what it is or what the buzz is for Zanabek. And, going from some fans' reactions and things like that, quick reactions, they're saying, like, hey, what was this thing about Demetrius Andrade not fighting Zanabek? Well, going from what Paul Andrade told me, it said there really wasn't any money in that particular bout. There really wasn't. And that was months ago. This was before they had that initial or that first purse bid for Demetrius Andrade and Zach Parker. And in that particular purse bid, Demetrius Andrade was going to be due a little bit north of $1 million coming from that purse bid. That was at the time between Matchroom Bison and Queensberry Promotions, won by Queensberry Promotions. But since that fight had fell through, Andrade wasn't part of Matchroom. Soon after that, he had been picked up by our guy there in Dimitri Salita Promotions for that particular time period. Had a purse bid once again. It was won by Queensberry Promotions once again, but it wasn't as much as that previous purse bid. Unfortunately, it's not even close. So Andre didn't go forward with that fight, and you still have to see what's next for Demetrius Andrade. And as of right now, I can't really give you an update on that. I did see him in attendance for the Deontay Wilder's fight over at the Barclays Center. There, but other than that, really hadn't heard much from him after that. So that's the situation with Demetrius Andrade. But back into the whole thing with Zanabek. I mean, he's there, like I said, in middleweight, WBO champion, having that defense, and it was just something where he was the stronger puncher, a little bit more accurate, but not as accurate as he usually is. I think that was kind of like a surprise to some that were watching it live. But Denzel Bentley really made a good account of himself in that particular bout. And as far as I know, I would like to see what else could happen there with Denzel Bentley. I don't know if it's going to be like a rematch against Fitness Cash, but maybe if he feels like he could still contend there in the middleweight division, maybe that is a thing that he could try to see if he could revisit a domestic strap rematch against Felix Cash. But you'll have to see who else could be put in position for him. I don't know. Maybe Chris Eubank Jr. next year if Zanabek is put in position to fight the mandatory challenger, which I doubt is going to happen. Jaime McGee said that okay, you'll have this one fight against somebody that, some may think that he shouldn't be fighting, and then after that it'll be a big fight. Well, we gotta wait and see what happens then with Jaime McGee. So outside of that, you had, after that was the main event there. He also had Sinisia Estrada going up against Jasmine Villarino, and I think what was that? That was a WBA minimum world championship fight. There, 10 rounds. Sinisia Estrada was undefeated at 22-0, going up against Jasmine Villarino, who had 9 professional bouts at that particular time. Was won by unanimous decision by Tanisha Estrada. So she defends that WBA minimum world title there. You also had Ray Murataya, who got a TKO victory over Miguel Contreras. You had Carlos Balderas with a TKO victory over Esteban Sanchez. Emiliano Vargas with a highlight reel knockout victory over Julio Martinez in the second round. I'm sure some of you boxing fans had seen that highlight, be played over and over. That was one of the uh, big knockout moments, pretty much the past few weeks, so to speak. So that's thing there. Of course, Emiliano Vargas is one of the sons of former great former world champion there in Fernando Vargas. And we had this win over Julio Martinez. Last night he had his debut on May 14th in Inglewood, California, against Mark Salgado, when he had a number of his brothers also part of that fight card in May, in Amado and Fernando Vargas Jr. So, but Emiliano Vargas having that win there over Julio Martinez in this card, and I guess Floyd Diaz had a TKO victory over Edgar Cortez as well. So that pretty much had covered what went down in the Palms Casino Resort in Las Vegas, Nevada, there for Top Rank on ESPN Plus, right? So you had that as one card that went down, and then the other event that took place on Saturday was in Cleveland, Ohio, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. It was headlined by the WBA Intercontinental Super Lightweight title. Intercontinental title. I'm sorry, y'all. Intercontinental title. What is this? The WWE, man? Come on, man. Intercontinental title. Like, you talking about, Shawn Michaels or Val Venus or, the British Bulldog. What are we doing? I don't know, man. But you had Montana Love coming in there as the WBA Intercontinental Champion against Steve Spark. Hey, Montana Love going in this thing with a record of 18 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw. Steve Spark coming in there with a record of 15 wins, 2 losses. And, it was something there where we, kind of like had tried to see Montana Love. He came in there, as a favorite, coming there as the, I guess, that Intercontinental Champion. They're performing in a main event in his hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, against Steve Spark. Steve Spark had, like I said, had 2 losses going into this particular bout. But one of them was against Tim Zoo. That was him there at the 154-pound division. And that was, last year, and the other one was way back in 2015, where he had a loss there in his second professional bout. But He had came from 153.5 pounds against Tim Tszyu last year to having this bout against Montana Love after getting a win TKO victory over Apinan Kong Song in June of this year. Yes, the same Apinan Kong Song that did fight and lose to Josh Taylor back in 2020. Yep, same one, same one. So him going from the uh, super welterweight division to the super lightweight division in the span of the year. That that's something right there. That's something. But he came in there, a come forward style. Try to get to his target, and once he tries to get to his target, he throws like very powerful punches, as was seen in those first couple of rounds there against Montana Love. While Montana Love was just trying to sit in the pocket or sit at a distance and try to catch Steve Spark with counter shots, and uh, that kind of like was working to a little bit of an extent there for Montana Love early in this particular bout. But when it was in close quarters, you seen that uh, Steve Spark took advantage of every opportunity he could have had there. Yeah, he wasn't going to be the better boxer coming into this fight, but he was going to try to use his strength, be the brawler, make it rough and tough there for Montana Love, and this is exactly what he was doing early. That's exactly what he was doing early in this bout. And thing about it is that Montana Love wasn't quite ready for it in the second round. He got blitzed, was back, had his back to the ropes, got blitzed, was caught with a couple of shots there, couldn't get himself in balance, tried to, clinch with C Spark, didn't work, ended up on the canvas in round two. Um, did he get caught pretty good with a punch? Yes. Was it something to where he was seriously hurt? Nah, not really. And so he was able to, get his bearings back very early after getting up and getting through that second round. So the second round, he was able to do that. Third round, kind of like seeing like it was back to the same things that he was doing, catching C Spark with lead lefts. And so he was southpaw, so he was catching them with lead lefts. But you really didn't see that many combinations being put together from Montana Love early in that particular bout. And for someone that came in there unbeaten, had built up a record there of 18 wins, 0 losses, and 1 draw. I guess people kind of would have expected him to kind of like separate himself from Steve Spark in this particular bout. Well, didn't quite look like that early in this bout. It got a little sloppy. A lot of clinches within that third and fourth round. And something where, yeah, you had moments of Montana Love like throwing a couple punches, then getting out of the way, stepping off to the side, and things like that. But other than that, nothing that could have overwhelmed Steve Spark. And Steve Spark, like I said, after that second round knockdown, that really boosted up his confidence over the course of the bout. But then you had the issue of, and you usually have this issue with orthodox fighter against the southpaw, heads getting too close, head clashes and things like that. And so, within the fifth round, yeah, that head clash there that caused the cut there under Montana Love's eye and stuff was a little bit of a welt, but also was a cut. And some felt like it was a very serious cut. But Montana Love, was talking to the doctor in between rounds and kind of like said, "Hey, I mean, I'm still good to go. I'm ready to rock. I'm ready to rumble. I can still do my thing in there." Okay, cool. But in the sixth round, you had a little bit more roughhousing, clinching, grabbing, all that type of stuff, and Montana Love couldn't really get get going or whatever it is, and it had went to the particular point where um Montana Love was caught in a clinch, had grabbed or was part of a grapple with Steve Spark, on the ropes. Had his left arm pretty much up to the head of Steve Spark, and his momentum pretty much pushed Steve Spark um, so far back through the ropes, had Steve Spark lean, and Steve Spark went all the way over the top rope, and he was eliminated from the Royal Rumble. And Montana Love is the winner of the Royal Rumble and will go into WrestleMania to face the WWE champion Roman Reigns. Oh, my bad. Wait, I'm sorry. This is a boxing match. It's not a wrestling match. It's supposed to be, like I said, he was the Intercontinental Champion, but since he was disqualified, he is no longer the Intercontinental Champion. So Steve Spark gets the victory by disqualification. Of course, there's like a whole lot of back and forth, between the two. And it was a whole crazy situation. In this particular instance, I felt like it could have had, like, for me, I just initially live, watching that thing live, right? I didn't feel like it would have been what you would say, a disqualification off the rip. Uh, I thought it would have been something where David Fields could have taken some points away from uh, Montana Love in this case, but he was just so quick to um, put up the disqualification for Montana Love. Even though I felt like Steve Sparker was really making that fight kind of like a rough, grimy, slimy type of fight, and that, yeah, you got to be able to do some things in order to get out of these clinches. But sometimes when a fighter gets that grimy, you got to do one of two things: either you got to get grimy back, or you're gonna have to, like, say, hey, ref, you're gonna have to watch this little. You gotta have to do something about all this right here, and I guess Montana Love in this corner felt like David Fields, the referee, didn't really do much as far as like notifying what Steve Spark was doing over the course of the bout up to that point. And so you got to that instance, like I said, with Montana Love's arm pretty much pushing Steve Spark. Now, was it with so much intent? I really don't think so. Not to where he would kind of like say, "Hey, I'm gonna just throw you out of the ring." No, but it was just something where I guess it got to the point where referee just said, "Hey, man, I ain't taking all of this, man. I'm disqualifying you right off rip." And so that's what happened. So that ends up as a disqualification loss for Montana Love. That is his first loss. That is, I guess, the Intercontinental Championship goes to C Spark in this case. And, we'll have to see what ends up happening. It was a crazy scene out there in Cleveland for that. And, Steve Spark, comes out there and has that as a victory. Doesn't mean that there will be an immediate rematch. Who knows? I don't know how the situation is with the Intercontinental Championship, but maybe they'll set something up for that. I felt like this thing could have been like I said, that fight could have kept going. It wasn't something really serious to the point where um, they could really have an immediate, uh, disqualification there in this instance. But that's basically what we have. Now, as far as like the rankings are concerned, even though Montana Love had that version of a WBA title, don't really necessarily see him in the WBA rankings currently. He was ranked at number 6 in the IBF, and he was ranked number 13 in the WBC. Um, So, with this disqualification loss, once the next rankings come out, pretty much a month from now, you're going to see him kind of like either removed from those rankings or, not quite uh, that high in the rankings for those. So that, like I said, is a definite setback for Montana Love. We will see what could be next out there for him if it's a rematch there against Steve Spark or not, or if they have something else there set up for them. Another bout that was there as a co-feature, and this was fairly notable given the recent signing that Matchroom had. They were able to sign Richardson Hitchens, to be there for Matchroom. Hitchens had those wins over Argenis Mendez and Malik Hawkins over the past couple of years. While being undefeated, going up against Jormar Alamo, and was able to get a stoppage victory over Alamo there in the eighth round. So he's there, still undefeated, uh, now at 15-0, and he's going to be moving up in those rankings at the super lightweight division. And given what happened there in the main event, something tells me that Hitchens is really, going to be talking a lot of trash going into the this next week. He was saying a lot in reference to him and Montana Love potentially facing each other, later on down the line. But for me, I feel like, hey, maybe Hitchens could be the next person up as far as like one of those guys that could really contend for something there in the 140-pound division, which I feel like is one of the deepest divisions in boxing. You know, so there's that. He did, you know, kind of like say a lot of stuff, after his fight. Um, he, said that, hey, maybe he could have a fight against Stevie Spark. He said, like on his Twitter, man, he said, all work is easy work. He can get in next. Or he also called out Liam Perro. Liam Perro is another contender there at the 140-pound division, a fairly highly ranked fighter there in the 140-pound division. So maybe he could get a matchup against Liam Perro, there, of course, while being under, Matchroom Boxing. Want to add in a guest here, chopping it up with us. Frank's in the building and here once again with the Boxing Source. What's happening?
Hey, what's up, Boxing Source?
All good, man. Some kind of like felt like this weekend would have been a slow boxing weekend, but given some of the results that happened, man, maybe there was a little bit more to talk about. So, that, like I said, we had a battle royal happen last night. Somebody run a battle royal last night and whatnot, and the other thing was, I guess one fighter didn't live up to expectations or something like that. So that's kind of like what I've ran down so far. Um, what did you think about like the card in Cleveland with Montana Love losing by DQ and also Richardson Hitchens getting a stoppage victory?
I didn't really watch the Hitchinsons. I think I might have seen him, but he just didn't really do anything for me. So, and I just seen on social media, on Twitter, that it was kind of a boring fight. But
Mm,
I did catch the Montana Love fight, and yeah, he was in hell. He was in hell from the opening bell. Um, I don't know. Is Montana's at 140, right? That last time I checked,
yeah,
he's at
yeah,
140, and
yep.
he's supposed to be a player at 140.
Hmm. That's where
Okay.
we're building them up as.
Yeah, so see, this is like one of the problems I have with boxing because fans are not consistent with their opinions. So, you're gonna take a guy like Mongear, right? He's a top contender, right? Or he should be talented for a title, right?
Right.
Okay, and he's getting shit for the Korea guy or whoever that not many people know about, which I understand, is understandable. So how come Montana Love wasn't getting shit for his opponent pick, and he's supposed to be a top guy?
Well, I mean, I guess some people felt like he was a top guy. Now in comparison to like maybe say Jaime Munguia, like that's kind of different since Jaime Munguia was the world champion in 154, going up to 160. But with Montana Love is to me it's more of like him having the promoter that he has behind him to kind of like say, hey, look at this guy. This guy's very talented. This and this and this. But even like early in the fight, you kind of like seen that yeah, like he was kind of doing something where uh, it wasn't like he was world level, like levels better than Stevie Spark, you know.
With
Um,
and that's my point is that Sparks was brought in to lose, and you have a guy Montana who's supposed to be. They're obviously trying to position him to become a world titleist, and he's
mhm,
struggling with the. I don't even see him ranked at all. Uh,
mhm.
so that's one of the
Well, yeah,
problems.
yeah, and the thing, what I was saying before you got on here was that with Spark, Spark is someone who was at 154 pounds a couple of years ago. Had lost to Tim Zoo a couple of years ago at 154, pretty much was like a 153 at the weigh-in for that, and was able to come down to 140 to have this fight, against Montana Love. So, for me, maybe it's something where you're saying like, okay, why are you having Montana Love matched up against a guy that was at 154 a couple of years ago, where he could be somebody that Montana Love isn't necessarily known for being a knockout artist anyway. So if he doesn't have something that could really have a pop in his punch, hey, Steven Spark might be able to walk through that. And in a couple of cases, that's what he was doing. He was just taking a risk, trying to walk through. And once he got close enough, then he was going to wheel on Montana Love. And that's how he was able to score that knockdown in the second round, you know? And so it just made it a rough bout for Montana Love from that point forward.
Yeah, yeah, Montana Love was in hell, so that's exact where I'm going with that. Last time I checked, he was a top 10 140 pounder, but I guess he fell out because Playo moved up. But yeah, I think the book was made on him. That guy was huge. I mean, that guy was a huge brawler. He's probably a good club fighter, but yeah, he was putting him in hell, knocked him down. Um, I didn't necessarily see it with Montana Love, which the case he was trying to make that the guy's being dirty. I didn't really see anything overly dirty. I mean, it was just a rough fight. I guess he didn't like that. He wants to be comfortable boxing. And the guy wasn't
Yeah.
letting him get comfortable. The clash looked accidental, and
Yep.
Montana was trying to argue that it was obviously intentional. Well, what did the ref didn't rule it. I don't think he even made a ruling on it. I didn't even see where he said accidental or intentional. So I don't know what Montana's trying to argue after the fact.
Yeah, he was kind of trying to argue it after the fact. His corner was definitely trying to argue it after the fact. Like I said, trainer was complaining about that, complaining about elbows, and all the other stuff, and that the referee didn't really say nothing about that. But like I was saying, I mean, if you got somebody that's in the ring that's a rough fighter or could be known for being rough, you got one or two things to do. Either you're gonna have to be rough right back, or you gonna have to have somebody before the fight kind of like tell the ref, be like, hey, check this guy out right here and see what he does in the ring during this fight, because he's known for having these rough tactics. So if he does this, then you're gonna have to, put a halt to it or slow that down or something like that. Because that happens with,
Hmm.
other referees. They kind of like do that. If they see that there's a fighter in there that is a little bit rough, and they could kind of like halt that a little bit, or they could just feel like, hey, fight on. You're gonna have to fight, you know?
Yeah, well, there's rough and there's dirty. I didn't see the guy. He wasn't being dirty, or he would have got a warning or something. The guy, he
Yeah.
just didn't want to be in rough, and he was crying about it. He was complaining about it, and that's just the simple end of it. And and yeah, and because was it after the headbutt, or when the incident happened where he was thrown over the top, he went to intentionally grab him. He was trying to hold on for dear life, and then when the guy was he so in order to get away, he put his arm over his head, and that's when
Mhm.
Montana put the elbow and then drove him over. So yeah, it was intentional. I think the ref made a good call, because at that point, what is he supposed to do? What is the ref supposed to do? Because if the guy got hurt, you know, he looks bad. He made he had to make a judgment on the spot, and I think he made the right call.
Yeah, I guess at that particular point, when you have a foul of that instance, especially when you like have one of the fighters go outside of the ring, and it's not, from a punch, then it's usually something where, the one guy forced the other fighter to go over the top rope, you know,
Yeah,
and
no, I what I didn't understand is, I don't know why because the corner got in the ref's face, and he's sitting there trying to explain himself. I mean, if I was that ref, I'd say, "Hey, I don't know if you can cuss on your show, but I'd have said, hey, get the fuck out of my face." Like, I mean, like, why are they being allowed to do that? I've seen
yeah,
instances where a ref made a bad call, and the people, you'll see the guys with the bands. I guess they're the commission,
hmm,
will get in and separate the ref, because you don't want
right,
the
yeah,
ref to be swayed. It's like
right,
someone should have stepped in and made a decision,
hmm,
and the ref is like almost changing his mind, because you've seen the Caucasian man with the glasses, and they're almost like, it looked like they're about to reverse it or call it
yeah,
a no contest or something
right,
to give Montana his way.
hmm,
Um, so that's the problem I had. I mean, the ref made the call, and he's telling him essentially what I seen. You may have seen different, that he was telling him, "Hey, I had to make a call because the guy hit the floor. Like, how do I know like he's not injured or
right.
something?"
Because I mean, it was just crazy luck that Steve Spark was able to land on his feet going over the top rope. What if he landed on his back, his head, or something like that, and he wouldn't have been able to continue. Period. You know, and
That part,
then
yeah.
so I mean, you were gonna, if that would have happened, like people would have likely called it a disqualification regardless. So one way or another, he went over the top rope. It wasn't due to a punch or nothing like that. So referee made the instinctual call to have it be a disqualification, and the Ohio State Athletic Commission should have just said, "Hey, he ruled the DQ. It's the DQ. That's it. That's all." So you couldn't have the corner of Montana Love complain about it. You couldn't have Eddie Hearn step in and say, "Hey, you could go ahead and you could file a complaint or a protest to the state athletic commission or whatever." You would just have it as you ruled it as a DQ, and as that. You know. With Montana Love's situation, it's just like you said. I mean, it's almost to the point where he just got overly frustrated of what was going on in there against Steve Spark, and yeah, I feel like this particular matchup, it looked like he came in there thinking that he was just going to be comfortably doing his thing, fighting his fight, and probably getting a decision win or something like that. And Steve Spark wasn't going to back down. One and two, like you said, I mean, he was just a much bigger guy. So if Montana Love just didn't have nothing to really hurt CM Spark, he was just gonna try to walk through him, you know. And I
Yeah,
think that at that particular point, it was just a matter of if Montana Love could just keep the distance against Steve Spark and just try to outbox him and see if he could get a decision out of that. But if it came to close quarters, he was going to be in some real trouble. And that
no,
was the
it
thing.
was.
He was
Mm-hmm.
in trouble in close quarters and didn't feel like he could really work his way through that. And so,
Yeah, and when it all went down with the eye, and then he's talking to the commissioner or the doctor. At that point, I kind of already, in my mind, I had said, yeah, he wants out of this fight. So it just was it wasn't a one, it wasn't like one single incident that he wanted out of the fight. It was the eye thing, and then trying to grab him, and then the elbow, and then it ends. So I think overall, Montana Love is not as good as well, I never thought he was good, but as good as people thought he was, and especially against the level of opposition that he was in
mhm.
against. So, Montana Love, man, I don't know where he goes from here because that's a bad performance. Not only did you lose, but I think you lost a lot of fans. That's I'm on social media. I don't know if you are, but
Yeah.
the fans are dogging him.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They probably, yeah, they most likely are.
But but for you know what? I still would want to see him, but he needs to face a top level guy to determine. If I'm his promoter, which I'm not, it's like okay, we're at a point where I almost look at it like with Teofimo, like you got one more shot. I'm gonna give you a comeback fight, but you gotta take on someone top because I'm not gonna keep investing in you and giving you a
Yeah.
date. We need
Well,
to know where you're at.
yeah, but I mean, it could be that situation where where it could involve Richardson Hitchens once again. Like there was a point last year where you had Malik Hawkins who was coming up in the ranks at 140 or so, something like that, was undefeated, and then fought Subriel Matias and got stopped by Subriel Matias, right? And
Okay.
so it was like, okay, let's see, where you're at this particular point in your career. So what do? They put him in there with the undefeated Richardson Hitchens, and Hitchens just basically, outboxes him over 10 rounds, for a unanimous decision win. And we haven't really seen much from Iceman Hawkins since. So now here, Hitchens was involved in this particular card. He got a win over Yomar Alamo, and now you see Montana Love here having this particular performance, and Hitchens is probably licking his fingers, saying that, hey man, this could be barbecue chicken alert. I mean, even though he said like on social media, like he probably could be, or he would want to face someone like a Liam Parrow or actually Steve Spark here. But hey, maybe they could just put him in there against Montana Love, especially given what happened overall, not just with the fight between Montana Love and Steve Spark, but given, I guess, the sales for that event in general, because they were talking about like they're in Cleveland that they weren't moving tickets at all for Montana Love, man. So
Yeah, I
hey,
guess all the talking isn't working. I
yeah,
guess he's
yeah,
a self promoter. But I'm looking at, I'm not ready to write off Montana Love. I
mm,
think he's a competitor. I think he could give anybody a hard night. Like I know this is an impossible fight, but I mean I could easily see him beating Brandon Lee, and beating a Leo Paro. I mean I could see him possibly winning those fights. Not that he would, but I
mm,
think these type of Steve Spark opponents and dates where he's a headliner are over. They have to be. You know, from a boxing fan perspective, I think that showed you that I don't think you need to give him the spotlight anymore until he proves it.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Now, yeah, I don't know if they would put him in the ring there against Liam Paro. I mean, that if they do, that could put Liam Paro at risk, given where his status is at 140. Um, because they have them positioned fairly well, within the WBO rankings. There and IBF, you know,
Yeah, no, I
actually,
mean I'm just throwing names out
yeah, yeah,
those are the level of opponents that he Montana need to face next because this was supposed to be a showcase fight.
mm-hmm,
And it definitely was a showcase the other way around. Just showcase
yeah,
us that that we don't want to see him anymore until it's against a legitimate top opponent, and we'll know if he's the goods or he goes back to being kind of a journeyman um, kind of guy.
yeah, for sure, man. On that, man. It's definitely gonna be something to see what happens there for Montana Love, their 140-pound division, going into 2023. It's gonna take um, you know, something for him to like regroup for what happened out there. Now going into I'm gonna circle back since joined in the conversation, loud conversation. I did talk about Janibek and then Hanuli's win over Denzel Bentley to defend the WBO middleweight championship. Was won by unanimous decision. Two scores of 8 rounds to four, one score of 10 rounds to two. I just felt like it was a little bit of a better fight than I expected. I didn't really know that much about Denzel Bentley going into the bout. Um, I did know about Zanabek. I've seen Janibek live. Not really seeing anything that stands out with Janibek that kind of like says that, oh, he's clearly like one of the top fighters there at 160. But given the lack of depth at 160 and given the lack of fights that are being made at 160, like he's almost like there at the top 4 or 5 by default. So, for me, I'm just waiting for him to see if he potentially faces someone like Jaime Munguia, especially with Munguia having this fight coming up next weekend.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I again, like I'm part of the social media. Looking on Twitter, and there's a lot of boxing people that are on there. So I listen, but and a lot of people were not impressed with Johnny Bet, which I understand. But that Bentley dude, he was okay, but I didn't see him uh, competing. I didn't think it was anything close. So, I think he's still he's the best in the division of just like you said on default.
I mean, it's more of like you have what is it, Gennady Golovkin still down there, as a unified champion. Um, and Golovkin could potentially fight Esquiva Falcao, as the Falcao is the IBF mandatory of sorts. We don't know what's going on with Jamal Charlo. It may be a little bit of a situation where he might end up being the WBC champion in recess for him not having a fight this year. So with that being said, it's more of like what else is out there at middleweight for Janibek to go out and fight. Like I haven't seen any mention of him potentially fighting a Chris Eubank. Chris Eubank didn't have a fight. Of course, his fight with Conor Ben fell
Hmm.
through. So, hey, what about Chris Eubank trying to go after him? I mean, I
I
haven't
thought I
really
heard him
seen.
call out Chris Eubanks. I don't know what the I guess Chris Eubanks is the zone matchroom guy,
Mhm.
and Janabak is top ranked. So I think they do work together. So
Yeah,
possibly that yeah, he would KO Eubanks. He'll take him out.
you know, but
Janabek, I look. I'm gonna be a. I know I'm gonna be in the minority here, but I think he's the goods. Now, is he like when we first seen Triple G? No, but I think he's very talented. I think he did a lot of things in there last night. And you have to understand, Bentley was there to survive. He was not there to win. And I think Janabek decided just to box him and land some big shots, which he did. I don't see how anybody thought Bentley was remotely competitive besides kind of tapping him. Was Janabek ever hurt? Was he ever in trouble? Because that's usually the benchmark between somebody saying that a guy was exposed or looked bad. Because I mean, I'm here, he looked bad. Where did he look bad?
Oh, it didn't look bad in this particular instance. It's just that I just didn't feel like he looked very very like really really good. There were times where he did catch Bentley a few in early in the fight,
Uh-huh.
um, and kind of like threw him off balance in a couple of instances. And then in the
Yeah.
11th,
You know,
especially the 12th round, he stunned him.
yeah. But
But
I mean that the middleweight historically is a glamour division, so
mhm,
people think Roy Jones, Hagler, Bernard Hopkins. I mean, there's some very talented names, but I mean Bernard Hopkins, he was not exactly a killer at 160. He had a lot of Robert Allens, and I mean he fought some bums. I mean there was a lot worse opponents than Bernard Hopkins faced. So people don't have a short memory, and even Roy had a bum in the month club. So Janibek is not going to look like Roy Jones Jr., but he's still a very, very good middleweight, especially when you have guys like Munguia that are challenging him. So, who's better than him right now is what I want to say to the detractors.
yeah, that's the thing. I would say Jamal Charlo is, um,
But
but
right now, you can't
yeah,
say Jamal Charlo's better than him.
right
We
now,
haven't seen
yes,
him.
I can.
It'll be almost 2 years.
Right now, yeah, I can still say that. Um, but I mean, like I said, I've seen both of these guys in the ring, and I'm like
Jamar Charlo
Jamal.
that went life and death with Montiel that just got K'd by Adamas. Not life and death, but he struck. Janet
But
Bag had a better
him against
performance against Bentley than
Derevyanchenko,
Charlo had against Montiel, who just got KO'd by Adamas.
him against Derevyanchenko was one of the better performances from him against Derevyanchenko in
How
comparison
long
to
ago
other
was that?
fighters, right? Um, we'll see what happens with Maul Charlo when he does get back in the ring. He'll probably end up fighting Carlos Adames, given the length
They're
of
not
time that
fighting.
he's
The
been out of the ring.
WBC just said they won't order it. Adamas tried to get it, and
But
I
he,
said it a
he should
while.
have.
Charlo's not going to be in the same room as Adamas.
But the thing about it is, they should have, given that Charlo was scheduled to fight this year in June, right, against Masi Selecki. That didn't happen due to injury. Then due to off the or outside the ring dealings, he was not able to be put into a fight this year, and it's highly likely that he might not be back in the ring until maybe after February or March. So that gives him a good amount of time that he's not been in the ring, and uh, that should basically, it should force the WBC to say, hey, you should be like named as a champion in recess, and have Carlos Adames be named the WBC champion. And once you're ready to go, if Adames is available, then you'll face Carlos Adames. But
Yeah, a lot of ifs there, and it's obvious the reason why they didn't do that because they don't want PBC has both those guys, Adamas and Charlo, and they're not going to risk Charlo for Adamas because Adamas could possibly beat him. And then had they did that, then Adamas would be champion. I think Janibek beats Adamas. He beats. I think he beats all those guys. I don't have any hope for Charlo coming back and being effective anymore. I mean, he could. It's just been so long that I don't think you
here
could.
would be my issue with Charlo. I just don't think if he comes back, I don't think he'll be back at 160. That's my concern. That would be it. But if he's able to make 160, then I'd have him at number one in the division. That's just me on that
And
front.
that's why I said I don't know then who's better than Janibek right now. I mean, you're talking about a guy that'll be out for almost 2 years. That's basically retired.
You know, so
If
I
you're
mean, we'll
if you're a
see.
ring champ, they
Yeah,
strip you. So, huh?
but if Janibek's the number one guy, 160 pounds right now, then the 160-pound division is very.
Yeah, no, and I think it's just biases. I think if Janibek was American, people would be on his nuts. It's just the way it is.
Nah,
Yeah,
nah,
it would. I mean, that's what people they're not getting behind him because he's another Eastern European.
nah. Well, it may be from other people, but when I've seen him in the ring live a couple times,
Hmm.
it's just it like in comparison to even Gennady Golovkin, right? To me, he doesn't even have that aura like Gennady Golovkin had when
Right.
he was
Yeah,
coming
that's
up,
fair.
you
Hmm.
know. So if you have if you're kind of like a step down from that coming up and you're about 13 fights in, um it's like what is it that will make him stand out? And you know what though, I think him against Jaime Munguia, that would be a very good fight. If they're able to make that next year, that would be a very good fight, and that would kind of like show like where both of those guys are at in the middleweight division. So that,
Hmm.
like, I mean, I know that they tried to order that fight earlier this year for, at the time it was going to be for the interim title, and it didn't go through. But next year it has to go down. Jaime Munguia, has this fight, next weekend, gets that win, then he got to go up there and he got to fight Janibek. He got to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and that's why I put Jenna back one right now because you have one guy, Andrade, who refused to fight him, gave up his belt. You have another guy, Munguia, who is ranked number one, and I think could have been a mandatory, didn't want to do it. You have another guy that's out, and I guess he said he'll never fight Golovkin because they're fellow
Right,
countrymen. But
countryman.
even Golovkin's, I mean, he's basically semi-retired. I mean, he's not gonna pull a 3-4 fight schedule. He's probably waiting for one more big fight. So, you know, he's the guy right now. I know people don't like it, but even skill wise, I think he beats them all. There's a reason Andrade didn't want to fight him.
Because there was no money, and that's coming
Well,
directly from multiple sources. Like it, I'll put it this way, right? Okay, you would have had at the time you had those two fights that were out there for Demetrius Andrade. Okay, um, interim WBO interim title at super middleweight and the WBO middleweight mandatory. He would have got a whole lot more money at that particular instance at that time to fight Zach Parker than he would have had to fight Zanabek. It wouldn't have been even close. So think about it is it's like, are you fighting, just to defend another belt against Zanabek that, you know, who knows how much money you would have got? You get the win. You don't know how much credit you would get for getting that win. And then after getting that win, what else is out there for you at 160 pounds? The issue with Demetrius Andrade was he was trying to go after unifications at that time. It was going after those for years. Never got them. So it's like, okay, what's the point of me stating at 160 pounds if I can't get the unifications against Gennady Golovkin or at the time before he moved up, Canelo Alvarez. Now, the Jamal Charlo thing, that's on Andrade. That's on Andrade because Steven Espinoza gave him that offer for him to fight Charlo for unification, and he turned it down. But those other guys were right there, fighting under the same network, working with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Boxing under the
yeah.
Zone platform and the network platform.
Well,
And he
then
came
I
up.
mean, if you're gonna if people are gonna take that, well, he wasn't gonna get paid for Jenna back then then it's okay for him not to take the fight. Then nobody can argue that the other way that they say the same thing about him. Well, they nobody took the fight because he's not worth that much. So it works both ways, and it's a valid, fair argument. But you can't cry and complain about it. You can't have it both ways, you know. So then you got to give the other guy a pass that you don't want to give a pass to for saying they ducked Andrade. He just wasn't worth that much. There was bigger fights out there. Like it has
Yeah.
to be consistent. You can't pick and choose who you want to give passes to for well, it wasn't worth the money.
But in this instance, where would it be worth the money for Demetrius Andrade to fight
No, I
Janibek?
know, but I'm saying people. There were other fights, just the name that he's associated with Canelo. Well, he ducked Canelo. Well, Canelo would say the same thing. Well, he's just not worth it. He sucks. Canelo's
But
words,
but
and he don't bring no viewers.
here's the
So,
issue with here's the
but it
issue.
has to work both ways. You have to stay consistent on that narrative. If you can't say, well, it wasn't worth it for Andrade to fight Janibek, so he gets that pass. Like that's what you're essentially doing, and then not give Canelo the pass. Then it works for Canelo too to have like not taken the fight with them.
In reference to in that particular instance.
Yeah, like
So
Andrade wants to make you guys believe that, oh well, I didn't take it because it wasn't worth it, but then want you to believe that Canelo was supposed to take the fight against him. Like it has to be consistent. It has to work both ways. So Andrade has to
here's the
live with
thing
the
on that,
fact that,
right?
well, huh?
Well, here's the thing on that, right? If Canelo could go ahead and take fights with other fighters that are not necessarily supposed to be in the ring with them, then how is it that he could get away with that, but Demetrius Andrade can't get away with what it was
But that's
what?
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Then
But
if
here's the
people
thing,
want to
right?
accept Andrade's if people want to buy his story about not taking the Janet Beck because it wasn't worth the money, then he has to let go of the whole Canelo duck me thing. Like
Well,
he can't have it both ways, and his fans can't have it both ways, and we as boxing people can't try to have it both ways.
but then okay, so here's my issue with that, right? Like from a fan standpoint, right? What I see is more people going after Demetrius Andrade than they do going after Canelo Alvarez. Particularly in the instance of, okay, Canelo Alvarez, right? When he was at middleweight, he had all of the major titles but one, and that was the WBO. And after he had his fight against Daniel Jacobs, he could have had his fight against Demetrius Andrade for the undisputed middleweight championship, and that didn't necessarily happen. So the thing is that people have to have the smoke or the criticism for Santos Saul Alvarez Barragan for not fighting Demetrius Andrade for undisputed at middleweight, like how Demetrius Andrade is getting criticized for not fighting Janibek and Hanuli for his mandatory challenger spot as a WBO middleweight champion. So if it's like you said, sometimes it has to be consistent. But if I don't see it being consistent for Canelo getting the criticism for not fighting Demetrius Andrade for undisputed, then that's still going to be a lingering issue.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. You can choose on either side you choose, but then you have to be consistent for both Andrade and Canelo. If you want to say no, Andrade should have just said, "Hey, you know what? This is the best challenger. I'm gonna fight him," and that's it. And so then I would say, "Okay, you're consistent there." Then Canelo, yeah, he should have said, "You know what? This is the best challenger. They could have unified. Then he should have challenged him. I'll give you that." But if you can't sit there and say, "Well, Andrade is telling you this story. Oh, well, it wasn't worth it." But he wants to have it both ways. He wants to say, but Canelo should have fought me when you weren't worth it. So, that's just the problem I have. If someone sits there and tells me, well, Andrade didn't take the fight because it wasn't worth it. Well, why is he telling the same story about another person when he's doing the same thing? That's what I don't like about those when people say those type of arguments.
Well, it's pretty much up to the individual in that particular.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So
that's kind of like how where it breaks down to in that instance.
right.
Um,
So I don't buy Andrade. I don't buy it. I mean, I know what you're saying about the business. I just don't buy it. I just think he thought the guy was a threat. If he thought he was the easy fight, he'd have took the fight and kept his belt. And still, he could have because if you keep your belt, you'll just be. I believe I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that if you keep the belt, you can already petition to become the number one ranked mandatory in the WBO. It don't make no sense to drop your belt and then because that would have happened with Stevenson. They said, he if he had made weight and kept his belts, he would have shot up to the number in the WBO rankings. He'd already be ranked number one just on that fact that you're
that
already a champion moving up.
that's up for debate because he was, NJ was already like champion for a good amount of years. So even when he like made the decision to go ahead and move up to 168, he wasn't like the immediate number one contender. They had like put him in, they had him slotted to face Zach Parker because in that particular instance, Zach Parker was already listed as a mandatory challenger for the WBO Super Middleweight Championship. So that's why when Andre made the decision to say he'll move up to 168, he would have had to fight Zach Parker first because Zach Parker had already been, listed or named as the mandatory for the WBO.
Yeah, that depends though if they decide to stay the number one or go for the interim.
Yeah,
You have
it's
to
it's
pick.
a it's a like a whole little situation there with WBO when it comes to how they do those things because sometimes either it's like if you're a super champion moving up or you've been a champion moving up and that type of thing. It's yeah, it's like a man, it's a mess sometimes with that.
Yeah, but I mean, we're just talking about the Andrade thing because, like I said, I think there's a reason that he didn't want to fight Janibek. That's what it amounts to, and then your counter to that was, well, there was a business decision, and then that's when I said, well, then why does Andrade have these false narratives? He wants to have it both ways. So that's how we ended up there. But really, it's about Janibek to me being the best
Well,
middleweight, and I don't think it's an argument right now. Now he may have looked average in his fight. I understand that, but I think that was due to the opponent, which I think is a better opponent than who had Damas face, who got all the buzz. And Adamas, he should get a shot at Charlo. They are ducking him. So yeah, middleweight's it's a kind of a murky situation right now, being there's no dominant. GG
there's
was the dominant guy, but now he's older. He's not the dominant force that he was. So
yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's not that guy. He's not that guy. But we'll see what happens in 2023. I mean, for me, I just don't. I think with the middleweight situation, it's
yeah,
been no different than it's been for the
but
past like 3 or 4 years. Like we've only had
yeah,
like that one unification bout
yeah.
between Gennady Golovkin and Ryota Murata. That's pretty much been it since Canelo Alvarez left middleweight to go up to super middleweight. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it right now. I think Janibek, and by this time next year, will be the number one middleweight, and he'll have beaten everybody. Um, and if he doesn't beat everybody, it's because they don't want to face him. Like Charlo will never step in the ring with him. Um, GG will probably go the Munguia route, and then yeah, I think this time next year he'll. Now people are basing that he's not the guy, he's not the boogeyman because of how he looked. But again, I think that's based on his opponent. But this time next year, he'll be the best middleweight.
Like I said, man, I don't know, man. It might be, like I said, it might be by
Who's
default.
gonna
'Cause, I
beat him?
mean,
Who do you? That's what I'm saying. Who do you? Who right now is gonna beat him? Who's better than him?
oh man, I got to look at the middleweight rankings again
I
because,
can give you the names. Like that's what I said. There's Golovkin, Charlo,
huh?
Andrade. Who already. Well,
Mm-mm.
you have your perspective.
Arlo,
I think didn't want to fight him.
tell you what,
Munguia didn't want to fight him. There's Eubanks, who I think will get smashed. There's Adamas, and there's political, so they can't fight, but he's getting ducked. There's
right?
Murata,
So wait,
Janovic will
so
beat.
well, there
There's
you go. It's
Derevchenko, and there's Lara.
political. It's political with Adamas, so it would be political with Charlo too.
No, because you said he wanted to unify, so
Well, we'll see. But
there's
sometimes
nothing for
when you
that.
have that, it's like
The
you
Charlo
feel
not
like
facing
there's some
Adamas, I
money in it.
get. There's not a bag. The Charlo not facing Adamas thing, I could understand just because Adamas is not a name. There's really not going to be a money. But if you want to stay consistent, then there should be no reason for him not to fight Janibek unless, like you said, he moves up. Which for what reason? There would be no reason for him to move up unless
Well,
it's Canelo Alvarez.
well, it's more than that. But the thing is, at this point now, since you have David Benavidez versus Caleb Plant, I really don't see like there being a fighter out there for Jamal Charlo to face, unless if he faced like somebody like a Jose who's kind of gooey as his first fight at 168, then waits for someone like that. But other than that, I'm not sure like where Jamal Charlo would go at that point. But he still has to get through what he has to get through first, and then move forward to see what will happen when he does step into the ring. Next weekend, like I said, is pretty bare as far as like schedules goes. You only had that one fight that's out there with with Jaime Munguia there in Guadalajara, Mexico. I know that there's some action in the
Oh yeah,
United
Mungia
Kingdom.
is fighting next week.
Man,
Yeah,
but next weekend should have been the date for the undisputed welterweight championship fight, but that's a whole nother story. Okay.
man, they're both. You
Um.
know what, man? F. You know what? F both of them, bro. I don't understand all these people who want to cry for Bud,
But
cry for Earl. Look, it's fuck both of them, dude. They to me they both didn't want the fight. That's my honest opinion. I think they both kind of are okay with it. You know, like when somebody leaves
uh,
you, you can chase them, or you can be like, you know what, I'm okay with it.
we'll see. Going into November 26th, like I said, with the Zach Parker thing, he's facing John Ryder for the interim title for super middleweight. But also November 26th is for the vacant WBC super lightweight title, Regis Prograis versus Jose Zepeda. That's going to be that's going to be a real good one.
It is.
You're also going to have Fernando Vargas Jr. That's going to be on that card, and Amado Vargas is going to be on that card. So two more of Fernando Vargas' sons are going to be involved in that card on November 26th, and also you have Dylan White versus Jermaine Franklin over in London in that particular fight card as well. So yeah, we got like a couple of weeks where nothing really major in the boxing front as far as like who's fighting in the ring, but after that things will start to pick back up once again. So definitely
Yeah.
looking forward to that. For like November 26th to December 3rd, you're gonna have something. Then December 10th, you're gonna have some action, a lot of action there.
Yep.
December 13th, undisputed. Well, for bantamweight, now in the way versus Paul Butler. So and that'll just see what goes on for going into 2023. But that's basically the schedule for the next couple of weeks there. And I'm pretty much I covered everything I needed to cover here in this particular live podcast. Thanks to Frank for joining in this live
Oh, thank
conversation.
you.
And of course, this is going to be available on iTunes, Google Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or whatever you use for your, to listen to your podcasts. And, like I said, at the end of every show, folks, point of boxing is a hit and I get hit, not a send and trade. On that note, folks, I'm out. Have a good
All right,
evening,
thank you.
everybody.